All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natalia Zavaleta. I'm a biology senior here at St. Ed's. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Rowe on this project since last summer. Well, I guess a little bit before the summer. But I'll be talking to you about lizards today, specifically, again, the morphological divergence in response to urbanization in Scoloporus olivaceus. Yeah, that's one. So this is the Austin skyline. This is back in 1995, and we can go to the next one. And this is the Austin skyline now. This picture was taken in 2024, and we can notice that there's kind of a shift. This is known as urbanization. We can go to the next slide, which is one of the most powerful forces that is shaping our modern landscape. This is usually urbanization has been transforming our habitats due to dense networks of highways, roads, buildings, and other human-made structures. As these environments change, so do the challenges for these endemic species, which are the species that are found in that habitat. They face some newer challenges that they wouldn't have been expecting if they were living in their natural environment. These are very rapid and often permanent changes that alter the selective pressures that act upon our wildlife. And this tends to lead into a shift in population, gene flow, and even phenotype. So an example of what a phenotype change is, it's a change in an organism's physical structure or trait. Usually other pressures that can also be observed are transfer of genetic material, so reduced transfer of genetic material. Again, all these changes, these buildings, these new highways are kind of cutting across natural landscapes. So then this makes a permanent or a physical barrier for these organisms, so they're not able to kind of go over to other areas, reproduce, spread their genetic material. So then this can lead to an isolation of species. We can also observe elevated mutation rates due to things like pollution. Obviously, Austin's a growing city. A lot of people are coming in, people are bringing their cars, so then this causes increased levels of pollution. Which can also cause isolated populations. And then to further understand the impacts of urbanization, we also have to talk about non-random changes. These are changes in a population that are usually driven by specific factors and not chance. They're usually expected and also observed in an entire population rather than in a random individual. And then with this understanding of kind of non-random changes in urbanization, we can move on to the goal of this project, which was to observe whether morphological traits or physical traits are changing due to the pressures of urbanization. The next one. So you might be wondering why lizards. So to answer our research goals, we decided to focus on lizards because they've been known to modify their morphology in response to environmental change. There's been a lot of reported literature on them being able to kind of adapt very quickly. And also, sorry, lost my page. But then they've been able to study the effects of urbanization in these lizards due to their ability to undergo rapid adaptation. They're also a great model for investigating the effects of urbanization, and a big reason why also is populations exist in large quantities, both in natural and in urban environments. So we're kind of able to see a little bit more of that. So specifically, we wanted to look at claws. We can go to the next one. So why claws? There's a little, you can click it again. So claws are essential for climbing rough and irregular terrain. Again, these are lizards, so lizards have claws, whereas geckos have toe pads. Most documented responses and most documented literature is reported with toe pads. So we wanted to look at something a little bit different. We wanted to look at our lizards. Lizards are also semi-terrestrial, so they spend a lot of their time on the ground and they spend a lot of time kind of up on the trees. So they need their they need their claws in order to grip onto all these different substrates. So it's very important for them to use their claws. You can also imagine that, again, urbanization, these landscapes are changing. We're adding fences, we're adding poles, posts. Things are made out of concrete, buildings. So they need to be able to adapt the use of their claws in order to kind of move on to these different substrates and be able to kind of cling on to those. And also, a lot of these surfaces are flatter. If you think about, comparing some tree bark to a flat concrete wall, they're very different structures, and it might be harder for them to kind of grip onto those. Again, the toe pads, that's with geckos, that's what they use. They're little sticky pads. So yeah, we wanted to focus on claws and specifically their curvature. So we can move on to the next one. So our research question was, does urbanization affect the claw curvature of Scolopendras? And that kind of got into our prediction of, if Scolopendras live in urban areas, then their claw curvature will increase with their grip. All right, so now for my methods. So for the data collection, we can move to the collection was done using an Olympus microscope to take pictures of the claws. Our pictures were then uploaded into an image analysis software known as ImageJ. This was my first time working with ImageJ, so it was kind of experimenting a little back and forth, seeing what would be best, kind of looking at videos, seeing what other people have done with ImageJ. And then we used a plugin called Kappa, which is in there. It kind of helps dictate curvature. Kind of the way that I did it, and I think one of the slides will kind of go into that, but so I took pictures of an arm and a leg, and I placed 10 markers alongside the claw curvature just to kind of keep it the same for all. Other variables that were collected, sex of the lizard, whether it was female or male. Scolopendras are sexually dimorphic creatures, so that means that the female ones tend to look different from the male ones. Also, obviously the type, so whether urban versus natural. Claw curvature and claw length, again, these were collected using ImageJ. We had a total of 66 lizards, and they were broken up into the two populations, natural, urban, and then female and male. Yeah, we can move on to the next one that just kind of showcases. So for the data collection, we did an analysis of covariance, also known as an ANCOVA, to compare both urban and natural lizard claw curvature. Our general statistic model took into account the average curvature and whether it can be predicted based on habitat type, while accounting for the length of the claw and the sex of the lizard. So that's what our model looked like down there. And then our results. So first we look at arm curvature. We can see that what's really interesting is that our natural claws are actually more curved. Oh, you can move on to the other, there. The natural claws are more curved than the urban claws. We can see that the line down the middle shows our average. That little line right there shows the average. So we can see that we obtained a value of 0.0084, which means that we do have a significant difference between natural and urban populations for their arm curvature. There might be a little bit of overlap on this graph, but we can see that the natural and the urban claw curvatures are independent from each other for the length of the claw. This is also supported by the p-value, showing that we had significant difference. And it kind of shows that this figure, the second figure, shows a trend. You can see that it is declining, so I like to showcase that figure just because it's a better visual representation of what's happening. And then after doing the arm curvature, we moved on to leg claw curvature. We used this exact same model. We got a p-value here of 0.002, which is also showing that there is a significant difference. And just like with arms, we do see that the natural claw curvature is significantly more curved than our urban claws. And if you do remember back to the beginning, that's actually opposite from our prediction, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. And then we can see that there is a negative effect once again with that kind of trending decline. So then that leads kind of to the main findings. Claw curvature differs by habitat type. So claw curvature was negatively related to claw length. So as the length of the claw increased, the curvature of the claw decreased. So something that I suspect why I suspect that this was happening is because the claws only curve at the end, kind of like the longer the curve is, it's kind of, the way that their morphology is a little interesting. But there's a lot of claw area before the claw starts curving, so I think that maybe not analyzing that would be better and just kind of analyzing the tip where most of the curve is would kind of cause the claw curvature to kind of differ. Next one. Again, this is kind of a little bit of a reiteration of a significant difference in arm claw curvature. Urban lizards, again, had a less curved. And you can physically see it between these two pictures. You can see the natural environment arm a little bit longer, more curved versus an urban one. It's a lot shorter and it's also a lot less curved. And then again, this is showing the legs. So some conclusions of why this could be happening. I think that urban surfaces could just be damaging the claws. These claws could just, from traveling this irregular terrain, it could just causing them to sand down, become flatter. And this provides evidence that morphological traits could either be trait-specific or they could be environment-based. So they could be either due to their traits or due to the environment that they are in. Some limitations to this project. We're unable to determine if these changes are adaptive or plastic due to the inability to measure heritability. We're not doing genetic analyses. We're not looking kind of at their DNA, so we're unable to kind of determine that, yes, this is an adaptation that's happening. Some things that could be done in the future to kind of expand on this project, again, genetic experimentation of an entire population or a common garden experiment. So this would mean like making my own generation of lizards and kind of keeping them in captivity and then kind of looking at how it changes during different generations. But yeah, some quick acknowledgments. Obviously, Dr. Rowe, my mentor, he's been there for me since my first semester of freshman year. Dr. Ogalo, Corey Langford, and Renee, who are the McNair cohort. This research was done with the McNair Scholars Program, and as well as the Honors Program. This was my first home here at St. Edward's. I'm very glad that I chose to, or I'm glad that I was inducted into this program. My McNair cohort, my friends, my family who are here today, and obviously the lizards, because this research could not be done without them. And yeah, thank you so much.
Questions for Natalia and we have
Yes.
How do you distinguish the habitat type between natural and urban?
Yeah, so I wasn't the one to collect these lizards. These lizards were collected by Dr. Rowe when he was doing his dissertation. He looked at, so for the urban lizards, they were found on campus at UTSA. So they were the ones, we see these a lot on campus too. Usually when you see them, something in the bushes, it's usually Scoloporus. But he collected them there. And then the ones that were the natural population, those were found in kind of like the woodsy San Antonio area, kind of like farther, I think, south of the UTSA campus. So they were a little bit farther away from, from where an urban area would be. Yeah. Any other?
So were you saying, did I understand that right, that you were saying that there is other research, there's more research done that's on geckos and on the topaz?
Yes.
And so were those findings similar, did their toes get shorter in urban environments or?
So what they were counting for their toes, so they have these little lines and they're their lamellae, which that's kind of what is like the sticky thing that kind of sticks on. So they would count those out. One of our other McNair scholars, she was doing the research with anolis, which are geckos, and she would count like how many lines they had on their toe pads and kind of if that increased or decreased based on urban versus natural. Yeah. Yeah.
Just that you don't know if it's an adaptive or a plastic.
Mm-hmm.
You have like the hypothesis what you think is happening?
I would say if I had to my hypothesis would be it's an adaptive trait, just because, again, urbanization is very quick. Adaptation can obviously take a pretty long time, but these are known to have pretty quick adaptation rates. So I think it's kind of one thing that if you survive out here. If you don't, then you don't. So I want to say that it's more likely an adaptive trait that's getting passed down. Yeah. Did you have, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if they looked at any other phenotypic differences in response to urban environments. Like, is there any,
Yeah.
scale or pattern?
We didn't look at any of those, but I know at the beginning of my at the beginning of my project, we were focusing obviously on claw curvature, but then we also wanted to look at claw length as an individual variable, but that kind of got a little too complicated, so we kind of had to scrap that idea. But I definitely think that it would be interesting to kind of look at like patterning, whether, you know, patterns are changing, colors are changing, kind of for better adaptability of the lizards. But I think that would be really interesting. Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. Now
So,
I
yes.
get to invite up your mentor, you mentioned Dr. Rowe, who will get to say a few things about working with you on this project and working with the lizards. And he'll also get to give Natalia the Cord and Soul Aware graduation, which represents not only this project, but 4 really incredible years in the honors program of excelling in coursework, of being a wonderful mentor, and now completing her thesis. So congratulations, and thank you, Dr. Rowe.
So, my relationship with Natalia is very different than most what I consider mentor-mentee relationships, and I actually took this teaching position right out of grad school. And my very first Gen Bio lab had Natalia in it. And somehow, for the first year and a half, she found a way to take one of my classes every semester. And she even came into my office to get special approval to take biostats early because she saw I was taking it, and then to get approval to take human anatomy a year early for the same reason. And we kind of just had a really good connection where she was able to pick up the way I was teaching. And it really worked out. And then she applied for McNair. And what most people don't know is that I'm specialized faculty here, so it takes a lot of things for me to be able to do research. And her getting approval to do McNair actually gave me the ability to do research with her. And I was extremely excited because of many students that I've worked with, she is definitely one of the more gifted students. And I know when she leaves St. Edward, she is going to go on to do great things. And I am so proud of everything that she has done here. And I know that everything she's done is just going to stick with me throughout the rest of my career, because honest to God, my career started with Natalia. And I will never forget that. So thank you so much for being a part of this.